that would favor higher inflation in exchange for more jobs than lower inflation and the stagnation. So my sense is I am preparing my clients for higher inflation, but I think we probably still have a couple of years of a buy before we have to really focus on it.
Are you preparing your clients already? Do you buy tips? Do you buy gold? A lot of people are even getting into oil as an inflation hedge.
Well, we typically carry a 5% weighting in commodities. We had been out of that area since the middle of last year. We just got back in, so we did go back into commodities as a neutral weighting. We are going to watch for a little more momentum, a little more indication that we want to go overweight. But for right now, we're neutral. Generally commodities are a tug of war between financial assets and real assets, and right now, real assets do have the upper hand.
All right, hang on one second, Jack. We're listening to the closing bell on this Thursday, June 18th, 2009. You're looking at live pictures of the S&P futures pit at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and rather than calm down at this part of the day, they jolt into action for the next 15 minutes trading S&P futures. Now, as the market settles, take a look at the indexes and how they're closing out. They will move around a little bit, obviously, as they settle, with the S&P 500 closing out a gain of about 0.8% at 918. Take a look at the Dow. It has gained about 54 points at the close there at 85.51. And the Nasdaq closing a little changed, but with the red arrow at 1807. So generally, we're seeing gains, although tech stocks were weaker today. Financial stocks and healthcare shares, as well as utilities, leading the way higher. You can see the gains in all of those S&P industry groups. Technology and energy stocks are lower, just fractionally, but that's where you see the weight there on the Nasdaq. Now, let's go down to the New York Stock Exchange. Chris Valerio is standing by. And Chris, another day in which the eco data kind of set the tone for the trade.
Hey, Matt, you know what? I'm here in front of J.P. Morgan. A little bit of a crowd here. Apparently a little bit of an imbalance at the end. That's why I'm standing here. I was just trying to know what's going on there. Financials were one of the groups that I'm going to talk about here in a second, but we just want to talk a little bit about kind of what happened in the trading session. And really, economic data had a lot to do with today's trading session. We had three pieces of information showing us the U.S. economy, at its best, is not getting worse, which is certainly encouraging news. You had continuing jobless claims falling for the first time since January. The Philly Fed number coming in much better than expected. And all of this, of course, adding to this idea that the economy is showing signs of improvement. And it wasn't just here in the U.S. I kind of want to take it to a global perspective. Remember, today the World Bank saying that China, its growth forecast for China, it raised that growth forecast. And, of course, China, the engine behind that raw materials demand. So from a sentiment standpoint, all these different types of ideas, not only here in the U.S., but also abroad, giving indications that we're no longer in survival mode. Now the question being, what is growth going to look like? What is expansion going to look like? And that is one of the reasons we saw gains on the day. Now, given that scenario, utility stocks, healthcare stocks, and consumer stocks ended up being our leaders of the session, Matt.
You promised us you would talk about financials. Yes. What do you got?
Thank you for reminding me. Got you here. As you see how quick that crowd dissipated. So I guess they got that imbalance. I know.
They need to get to Harry's as soon as possible.
Especially on a rainy, cloudy day down here on Wall Street. Let me tell you. Woo! All right, financial stocks. Talking about it here. Up for the first time in 4 trading sessions, we had 66 of the 80 stocks on that S&P 500 financial index higher. That said, here's the deal. Financial stocks were down for 3 straight days before this, and we're actually headed for our biggest weekly drop in about 3 months for those financial stocks. Really had a big gain that we've seen. Now, of course, a lot of attention on financial stocks because Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner testifying about this new regulatory environment, these new changes, and certainly it's going to be interesting to see how that